Hi, I'm Kaz. I'm a farm consultant and we also farm in North Cumbria on a beef and sheep farm near Penrith. So on the farm we have 400 acres of lowland ground plus 1,000 acres of fell where we run the beef and sheep. And then in my consultancy role I spend time with farmers looking at everything from environmental schemes to business planning, basically helping the businesses to be more sustainable and more resilient in the current agricultural climate. So on the farm here we have got both upland and lowland ground, so that gives us a really good mix. It gives us the ability to be able to have sheep up on the fell, for example, and then to bring them down to the lower ground to finish them, to sell them at the end of the day. So the benefits of having both upland and lowland ground on the farm is huge for the stock. So the upland ground, particularly in the summer, gives you space to graze the animals. They can create wide open habitats up there for things like nesting birds, and then also the lowland ground provides them with shelter, protection. The grass that grows on the lower ground is of higher quality, higher energy, and therefore is more productive for the animals. So it's a real benefit to have a mix of both grounds for us and the way that we farm. So one of the breeds that we have on our farm is the Swaledale. It's a traditional hill breed. You'll see it around a lot up in the uplands. It's easily recognisable by its black face, its horns, and its hardy fleece that keeps it safe from the weather. The reason why you'll find these breeds on the hill, they are tough, they're hardy, they're a smaller bodied sheep, so they find it easier to survive in harsher conditions. On our farm, for instance, they'll be found up to 2,000 feet above sea level. So they really do need to be tough little sheep to survive up there. So lambing time on this farm starts in February and goes through till May. There's different batches of sheep within that time period. Some farms start even earlier. You can see some lambs arrive at Christmas time. That depends on the breeds of sheep that they have on the farm, and there's different reasons for doing this. So these are some of the lambing sheep. You'll see on the ground there's some root crops which have been put in the field for them. This is just to boost their energy before lambing time, to give them a little bit of extra, just to keep them going. I'll get a bit closer so you can see. So these just really help boost the sheep's energy and keep some condition on them before lambing. Obviously it's a really important time of year and you want to do everything you can to give them as much as possible to look after them. So another common breed that you'll see is the mule sheep. The mule is created by crossing a Swaledale and a blue-faced Leicester. You then create the mule ewe. That will then tend to be the mother of a lot of the lamb you'll then find in the supermarket. So the mule sheep does create the backbone of the UK flock. So everything filters down from the uplands, from the Swaledale down to the mule and into the lowlands. So as I said, it is really the backbone of that flock. So we're going to head up to the upland part of the farm now to have a talk about what happens up there. So this is the fell ground that goes with our farm. So the sheep come up here to graze. You'll send the Swaledale sheep up here after they've lambed with their single lambs. They will then create what is called your hefted flock. So the mothers will basically teach the lambs where to graze, what is their section of the fell, and they will stick to that section of the fell. And it's hefted down through the generations of sheep to create that heft. So they always come back to the same place to graze and they learn that off their mums. So the single lambs will come up here because they're only looking after one lamb. They don't necessarily need as much input in terms of feed. So the grass up here is enough for them. Whereas if you have a sheep that has 2 lambs or 3 lambs, they need potentially a higher quality grass and higher quality feed because they're using more energy to look after that higher number of lambs. So this is where the sheep graze. You can see the effect that their grazing has on the ground. So you've got some patchy areas, you've got some areas of rush, and what they do is they create this quite open habitat. So this is therefore where we'll tend to find the curlews, the lapwings, because they find that they like these kind of areas for nesting. They've got open space, they can see where predators might be coming from, but they've also got shelter. And it's, the sheep are essential in this environment to create that kind of habitat for those birds to nest. So you can see here as well, when you actually get closer down, you can see it's not just grass. You know, the grazing creates space for the mosses, you've got the star moss, different sorts of grasses as well. So when you actually get down closer to the ground, you can see the variety of what, you know, might, if you're looking from the road, it might just look like a grassy hill, whereas actually when you get down to it, you can see the variety that the grazing does help to provide. So here you can see you've got a longer piece of grass here. So again, you're creating habitats for different types of animals. This is potentially a mouse or a vole creating a little hole in there. So again, it's about maybe getting down and having a closer look at what's actually going on the ground. So we have Swaledales on our farm. As you can see, the kind of ground we're walking across now, it's pretty rough, it's pretty cold. So the Swaledale is really, really well suited to ground like this. They're quite a small sheep, so they don't require lots and lots of inputs and feed to keep them going. They can withstand the weather up here. The wool is really coarse, it keeps the weather out. It's also great for making carpets. But they are really, really good mums as well, so they'll look after the lambs really well up here. What you'll find is for a Swaledale, for the size of her body weight, the amount of weight of lamb she can produce is really quite impressive. So yeah, there's many reasons why the Swaledale is suited to being up here when you're 2,000 feet above sea level. So what we are finding, particularly in the last couple of years, is that ticks seem to be more of a problem. We're not entirely sure why that is. It's possible that it could be because of an increased number of deer. There's an increased number of trees up on the fell, so that could be a cause of that, but we are finding that that is something that is now becoming an issue that hasn't necessarily been for us before. It does sort of create a bit of cause for concern. You know, they are something that are a potential risk to public health in terms of spreading louping ill, Lyme's disease, so the tick problem is something that needs addressing. So sheep are really good at creating almost like a tick mop. So they, as well as grazing these fells, they will manage the ticks by grazing habitats like this as well. So again, that's another reason why they're so important in these landscapes.
So we're obviously back down off the fell now, and we were talking about ticks up on the fell. Is there any other problems that farmers, especially at lambing time, face?
Yeah, so one of the other ones that we tend to see is problems with crows. So they basically will wait for a lamb to be born. They tend to sort of come in packs and they'll actually wait for lambs to be born, and then whilst they're in that vulnerable newborn state, they will go in and attack them. So they'll peck out their eyes, they'll sometimes take out their tongues, they'll go for the umbilical cord, so it's pretty grim.
Yeah.
And obviously then that's a huge problem. More often than not, you've probably got an alive lamb, which obviously isn't going to be able to do anything.
Yeah.
That's got to be dealt with humanely. And then also, I think what farmers in general are tending to find now is that ravens are becoming a bigger problem. So they're doing what crows do, but they also tend to operate alone.
Right.
So whereas crows, you would tend to see like a big number of crows, you might get an individual raven that's actually doing the same thing, and of course that's harder to spot.
So obviously with crows, there is a management licensing system that you can use to control crows. Is there anything with ravens that you can do?
You can, but you are a bit more limited. So you can use more sort of audio deterrents. So you might have what we call like a crow banger, and it does sound like it's a gas gun basically. So it does sound like a gun going off. Yeah. And you can sort of try and restrict any food sources that might be available to them. But yeah, it can be a difficult situation. And again, if you've got an individual animal that's doing that, it's much harder to notice it and monitor what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you can see, I do have dogs. My dogs are very good with sheep because they've obviously been brought up around them and they are trained around sheep. But am I okay to take my 3 dogs off a lead walking through your fields?
Short answer is no.
Yeah.
So, I mean, any time of year, you really should always stick to footpaths.
Yeah.
We've got dogs ourselves at home, we've got Labradors as well as working dogs, and I personally wouldn't necessarily let the dog off the lead when there's livestock, even though she obviously lives there and is used to it. But particularly in lambing time, it's such a big risk to even use before they've lambed. They can, if a dog gets in amongst them, even if it doesn't cause any sort of obvious physical damage, it can put stress on the sheep, which can cause miscarriage and other problems, prolapses and things for the sheep when they are lambing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for the sake of safety for the sheep and for your own dogs as well, it's much better to stick to footpath and just use that lead.
Yeah. So we've obviously covered the fact that you have upland and lowland land on your farm. But when we say lowland, there's kind of two different kinds of lowland, isn't there? So there's farms that are further south in England, which are maybe agricultural farms, and then there's the upland farms like what you live on. What do you think are the main differences between those two types of farms?
So I think if you look at, if we particularly focus on environment and nature and that side of things, what you sometimes will find is that if you have a larger scale, say potentially more arable farm, so you're focused on growing crops as opposed to rearing livestock, you might have a little bit more space to experiment with things, or you might be able to, say, take off some sides of fields or field margins to do certain projects that might fit into agri-environment schemes. Sometimes that scale just means that you can afford to potentially have a go at things like that. Also, maybe if you look at diversification, if you're looking at, say, farm shops or sort of public access, that type of thing, you might have, if you've a farm with better access off main roads and things, you potentially have more opportunity for diversification, or to get that public access, or to just add that little bit of something extra, which if you're a bit more rural, a bit more remote in the uplands, your access might not be great, and you've still got that fantastic product, that beef or that lamb that's coming off the hill, but you might not necessarily have the kind of the access for people to be able to get to that and to diversify in that way as well.
So in terms of your upland farmers, which is mainly who you work with through your consultancy, what do you think the main problems are that they're facing at the moment?
So there's quite a lot of different things going on at the moment, but one of the things that I'm finding, so a lot of the work I do is focused on what we call agri-environment schemes, so basically looking at how we can improve income coming into the farm, things that can be done. Some of these schemes that are currently on farms have been on these farms for 20 plus years. They're potentially a bit outdated, the payment rates haven't kept up with inflation, but these farms will be locked into these schemes until they expire. Sometimes that is preventing access into the newer, more progressive schemes, where they could be doing different things, they could be looking at different options that maybe suit their farm business better and would allow them to progress, but the sort of mechanisms of swapping from one scheme to the other just isn't there. So that can be quite restrictive. I think as well, if you look at farm incomes, as a general trend, the higher the farm, the more limited the profit, I suppose, is a basic way of putting it. A lot of the more upland farms will only be profitable with these subsidy schemes, which doesn't always sit well with everybody, with the farmers and other people. They want to be able to push on to progress, to get properly paid for the things that they're producing, so they don't necessarily have to rely on these other income streams.
I guess also some of these farms and schemes won't match up very well, so like the ground that you will have in the uplands is maybe not as productive as your lowland. So in terms of rewilding an area or re-wetting an area, it must be quite difficult for upland farms to be able to carry out some of those schemes because of the land they have.
Yeah, and I think as well what you find is there's a lot of different pulls on this land now, especially the more upland ground. So you've got maybe, the farmer wants to go in one direction with their business, but then you've got sort of other influences from outside, whether it be sort of natural England wanting to go in a certain direction. And it's really just about everybody trying to, a lot of the time if they sit down together, their aims are ultimately the same, but there's all these people pulling in different directions of what they think is best for the land. And I think sometimes within that, the farmer's voice can get lost as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's always worth remembering that they are the ones that farm the land, that manage the land, that have the knowledge of what's there, of what thrives, of what doesn't thrive, of how to manage it. And I think, especially when we're looking at kind of how we keep these landscapes looking as they do and how we preserve them, and this way of life, it's really, you know, we've got to listen to those voices that are on the ground doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's like a lot of the areas around the North Pennines or in the North Pennines are areas of outstanding natural beauty, and the reality of that is management.
Yeah.
A lot, you know, most of that land,
Absolutely.
if not all of that land, is managed and has been for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah, it has been for centuries, and that's, you know, why it looks the way it looks.
Yeah.
Because it has been managed, it has been developed like that, and ultimately farming is responsible for a lot of that. And, you know, if we want to keep, say, the North Pennines, for example, looking the way it does, then, you know, we need to make everything work in harmony. There's a place for everything, but it is about getting that balance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.